When we started this trial, I explained to you what the big three were. I've got a new big three. The three defenses of Joseph Zieler. It wasn't me. It was my kind of sometimes dad or my half-brother. Or was it, I was in Maryland, couldn't be me. Or, number three, maybe it was, well, maybe I slept with Jan or some other lady I read about in State's Discovery somewhere, and that's how my semen ended up on an 11-year-old girl who happened to be murdered the night my semen was found. We'll get back to his defenses, though. You spent the last 3 days listening to testimony and seeing evidence, and we're very grateful and thankful. We know that it's been hard on you, and it's a huge inconvenience. But this is the time where we're going to take the testimony and the evidence, and we're going to take the law that the judge is going to give you through jury instructions, and you're going to see how they apply to each other. It's been a long 3 days, and you have heard. Do not forget, this is a simple case. It is very simple. What have we heard? The very first witness was Jan Cornell, and it was unbelievably emotional, and she told you what happened when she got home on May 10th of 1990. Her 11-year-old daughter was dead in her room, her knees on the carpet, face pushed into the carpet, legs spread, her genitals showing. She's cold, there's blood. Her daughter was dead. And then you heard about her roommate Lisa's story, who was dead, naked in her bed, in a fetal position with her head covered by a pillow. Jan was questioned by the cops numerous times, and she told them anything they wanted to know. They asked her about her sex, was ready to give them the address. Just because an attorney asks a question of a witness, please remember that is not evidence. You heard from the defense ask Jan Cornell, who's Randy Jackson and why is his hair all over your house? And she said, I don't know. And then you heard from two state's witnesses. One, Todd Everly, that said it wasn't his hair in the house. And then you heard from a DNA evidence or analyst, Jim Pollack, who said wasn't his DNA or his semen. So I want you to keep that in mind, that you may have heard things at times, and that doesn't mean that they are considered evidence in this case. Another one, Jan was asked, are you into something shady? First of all, I don't even know what that means, but please, don't assume that there was something nefarious going on because the defense attorney threw that out. And, oh, Lisa's story. She had 3 beer cans on her nightstand. God forbid a grown woman drink 3 drinks in one night. Maybe she drank them throughout the day, who knows, but also, I don't know what it's trying to apply, but it's trying to apply that Lisa's story was probably drunk and who knows what she did or what happened. You heard from Todd Everly. He was the first detective from the Cape Coral Police Department that was assigned to the case. And he told you about the manpower and the dedication and the people they got DNA samples from. Over 300 samples were submitted to labs, and the prints and the evidence and the walkthroughs and the photos. And I don't know if it was early in his testimony or later, but he was specifically asked by Mr. Thornburg, at any point when you saw Robin Cornell, did she have blonde hairs clutched in her hand? And the answer was no. The man who was the case agent who looked at the victim said no. You've heard some stuff about blonde hairs. There were no blonde hairs. Just because the defendant starts shouting about blonde hairs of a blonde-haired killer, that means nothing. There's been no evidence and no testimony from anyone. The only evidence and testimony we have is there were none. You know, the medical examiner spent a long time going over the injuries that they both sustained, the bruises and abrasions and the awful injuries to Robin's vagina and to Lisa's anus. And how Lisa almost bit through her tongue as she was trying to get air and she was trying to force her tongue out of her mouth. But like I said from the beginning, the DNA is where this case really lies. Through our DNA analysts, we were able to show you on State's Exhibit 152 This is why Joseph Zieler is here. This is why he's in court. This is why he was charged. His profile is on the sheet that has the same contributor as the pillowcase on the pillow that he used to prop Robin Cornell up in the air, just like he used to do with his girlfriend of 25 years, Bonnie Nicely, when he liked to have sex with her. And the same contributor whose genital swab of Robin Cornell matches his profile. He again is on her vaginal swab. That's why we're here. More than 1 in 700 billion. It's really more than 1 in 83 quintillion. That's 18 zeros. Him. It is him. It's not daddy. It's not my brother. The pillowcase. 1 in 450 million. It's him. And Robin's genital swabbings, 1 in 360,000. It's Joseph Zieler. There was no other DNA found besides his, which is an interesting point. How unlucky do you have to be that the night you decide, or the night that someone else decides to rape and murder 2 women, his DNA shows up nowhere, but yours does? God, that's the unluckiest thing I've ever heard. Think about that. The real killer, the culprit, the suspect, left nothing behind. But his was there. The light brown, again, light brown hair that was found on Lisa Story's body. 1 in 16 million, it was Joseph Zieler. So if he had sex, I guess, in Jan's house at some time, he left some hairs floating around as well that just happened to be on Lisa Story's naked body the night she's murdered. Very unlucky. And I want you to remember, too, when Vicki Bellino was on the stand, she specifically excluded Jan Cornell as being the female contributor to NB32A, the bed sheet. The female portion was consistent with Robin Cornell, not Jan Cornell. Bonnie. Yeah, I don't know how many times she said, he knows. Names, dates, money, motorcycles, how to take care of himself. And I don't know, maybe it was just me and I wasn't paying close enough attention, but I did not see somebody up there smirking. She was nervous, she was scared, and she was angry. So again, just because the defense says, why are you smirking? Please remember what you saw and what you heard, not what we're telling you heard or saw. You know, the jail calls, well, back in 1990, I went through this before, and nothing bit me in the ass then, so there's a very good chance it won't. This is what I'm telling you I think it is, what the state thinks it is. Remember, he was arrested in July of 1990, 2 months after the murders. Think about it. He gets arrested and he's concerned that his DNA may have been taken in that time. But it never came back on him. He didn't get arrested for the murders then. So now he's saying, back in 1990, I went through this before and nothing bit me in the ass. So there's a very good chance it won't this time. Because last time, it didn't. And in the letter to Bonnie, where he's pleading for her to bond him out and where things crept. I can't help what things transpired before us, and I hid in that room for 20 years, and now this has happened, and there will be no more chance to hide, and on and on. I believe the defendant's explanation, well, there was a warrant out for my arrest in Illinois, and I just want to point out a few things about that. You mean the non-extraditable warrant? When you get pulled over by the police, they're going to let you go? That must have been huge. Must have been serious that you've been worrying for 20 years about that. And you get arrested in 2016, and they don't serve you with that warrant? It makes no sense. The defendant's interview I told you there were two Joseph Zielers that day. One who spoke to CCPD and one who spoke to LCSO. And it begs the question, why? Why freely answer things to LCSO in August? Give them whatever information they want. But then when you're taken to Cape Coral, you're gonna feign ignorance. Why? What is it about Cape Coral that has you playing dumb? What are you scared of? When he's talking to Detective Christy Joe Ellis, he doesn't remember his anniversary or how long he's been with Bonnie. Well, he tells Detective Divis, I've been with her for 26 years. He said that, this accident caused him to not be able to read or write. Well, he clearly is a writer. We all saw that. And he can clearly read as well. Doesn't know where he went to high school and doesn't remember what he ever did before he was disabled. Oh, Detective Divis, he knew that he built boats. And he told him multiple places that he worked when he built boats. Doesn't remember anything about his parents, doesn't even know their names, but he's able to recall the way that he was raised and the way his father treated him when he was growing up. It's crazy how you have the Joseph Zieler before he's confronted with the murders and the one after he's confronted with the murders. And another thing in his interview, his comment, well, what's the death penalty in Florida? He's being facetious. What a perfect time to be flippant and silly, right? Yeah. I want to go over some of the jury instructions that the judge is going to go over with you. Now, the judge is going to give you a lot more instructions than what I'm going to go over, but I want to touch on a few things. The defendant is charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. One for Lisa Story and one for Robin Cornell. There are 2 ways to prove first-degree murder. One is premeditated, and the other way is with felony murder. And I anticipate this is what the judge is going to tell you about first-degree premeditated murder. The 3 elements are 1, Robin Cornell is dead. Again, for the second count, it would be Lisa Story's dead. We know that. No one is challenging that. 2, the death was caused by the criminal act of Joseph Adam Zieler. And 3, there was a premeditated killing of Robin Cornell, or in count 2, Lisa Story. Premeditation is killing after consciously deciding to do so. The decision must be present in the mind at the time of the killing. The law does not fix the exact period of time that must pass between the formation of the premeditated intent to kill and the killing. The period of time must be long enough to allow reflection by the defendant. The premeditated intent to kill must be formed before the killing. Think back to what the medical examiner testified to. It takes 60 or 70 seconds of being suffocated before you lose consciousness. But it takes 3 to 5 minutes of continuous pressure to cause death. So best case scenario is that it only took Robin and Lisa 3 to 5 minutes to die. But if they were fighting back at all, could have added some time to that. But in that time frame of 6 to 8 minutes that he has to smother these 2, and they're possibly struggling, I would say that is time to reflect. 3 to 5 minutes each, time to reflect. It was absolutely premeditated. He didn't have to do it. He could have stopped. He formed the intent to kill them, and he followed through with it. The second way to prove first-degree murder is through felony murder. And again, there are 3 elements. Again, Robin Cornell is dead. While engaged in the death caused the death of Robin Cornell. And 3, Joseph Adam Zieler was the person who killed them. The state has alleged that for the burglary, the defendant attempted some very specific things. You're going to get the definition of burglary, and you're going to have to find that the defendant entered a structure owned by or in possession of Jan Cornell or Lisa Story. That's a given. We know that. The defendant did not have permission or consent of Janice Cornell or Lisa Story or anyone authorized to act for her or them to enter the structure at the time. No one said, yes, you can go in there. And at the time of the entering the structure, the defendant had a fully formed conscious intent to commit the offense of theft, battery, or sexual battery in the structure. We have to prove that when he went in that house, he intended, not that he had to carry through, the offense of theft, battery, or sexual battery. And again, you're going to get the instructions of what theft, battery, or sexual battery are. For theft is the knowing and unlawful obtaining or using or the endeavoring to obtain or using the property of another or person or persons, and doing so with the intent to either temporarily, permanently deprive the other person or persons of their right to the property or any benefit from it. You heard the testimony. That watch that Lisa Story was so proud of to give her boyfriend Randy was gone. She was wrapping it that night on her bed, and then no one ever saw it again, along with a gold ring she had, her driver's license, and a credit card. That is theft. That was carried out. The house was ransacked. Someone went through it, and they took what they wanted. Battery is defined as the actual and intentional touching or striking of another person against the person's will, or the intentional causing of bodily harm to another person. I would say that murdering someone and causing their death is definitely a battery. Or you can find that the intent was to commit a sexual battery. Sexual battery is defined as an act or acts committed upon another person in which the sexual organ of the perpetrator penetrated or a union with the anus or vagina of the other person. And an act committed upon the other person in which the anus or vagina of the other person was penetrated by an object. And these acts were committed without the consent of the other person. You heard about the injuries to Robin's vagina and to Lisa's anus. Clearly, a sexual battery occurred. Another instruction that the judge is going to give you is for plea of not guilty, reasonable doubt, and burden of proof. And I want to touch on the defendant's first defense, but I want you to hear this first. A reasonable doubt is not a mere possible doubt, speculative, imaginary, or forced doubt. Again, a reasonable doubt is not a mere possible doubt, speculative, imaginary, or forced doubt. Maybe it was my half-brother who has blonde hair, which has nothing to do with this case at all, or my father who something about probably ended up framing me because I couldn't tell CCPD because he stole crab legs and cheesecake, and I don't know. But there's no evidence that any other person with the last name Zieler was ever in that house except for him. That is what we call speculative doubt. Or you can take the defense of being in Maryland, and I have to be honest, I was very confused at the end. He was there, but then he wasn't there, and then he was only there because we told him he was there in some piece of paper that the paper really never said. I have no idea at the end of the day what we were getting at, but that is an imaginary doubt. And number 3, maybe he did sleep with Jan when he was here and going to the bars in Cape Coral. Not only does Jan have no idea who he is, but how is his semen getting on Robin? How? And again, in the night it happens, that she happens to be raped and murdered, the real culprit's semen isn't left anywhere. Unfortunately, his is, though. I don't know how it got onto Robin, but it did. That is what we call forced doubt. The judge is going to give you an instruction called weighing the evidence, and I just want to touch on a few of these. When considering the credibility of a witness, you get to take some things into consideration. And one of those things is, did the witness have some interest in how the case should be decided? I mean, it's very evident he has an interest in how he wants this case decided. And we know that he doesn't necessarily tell the truth if it's not going to benefit him. We've seen that through the statements that he's given LCSO and CCPD. Does the witness's testimony agree with the other testimony and other evidence in the case? None of his testimony is backed up by any evidence. All of the evidence actually points the other direction towards his guilt. And the judge is going to tell you about some rules of deliberation, and I want to just touch on these because this is a case that has a lot of emotion to it. But the judge is going to tell you this case must be decided only upon the evidence that you've heard from the testimony of the witnesses. Your verdict should not be influenced by feelings of prejudice, bias, or sympathy. Your verdict must be based on the evidence and on the law contained in these instructions. Your verdict has to be based on what we have presented to you. This was a horrible, tragic event where 2 beautiful people lost their lives. And there's grieving families on both sides. But I'm telling you, it has to be on the evidence, and the state has met their burden. And lastly, the defense in their opening statement said, what was his motive? If I had to explain why a child molester molest children, because they're sick, I couldn't answer that. But the beautiful part is, I don't have to answer that. I don't have to tell you why he did it. The defense was correct about that. At the end of the day, the state has shown you beyond a reasonable doubt that Robin Cornell and Lisa Story are dead. And they were murdered by Joseph Zieler. On May of 1990, he murdered them in Cape Coral. What was his motive? I don't care. Thank you.